Jasmine Crockett was fined in open court for wearing a cross necklace. But when the lead attorney collapsed, she stepped up and argued the case with such brilliance that even the judge had to reconsider. By 9:00 a.m., the courtroom in Dallas County was already packed. Low murmurs filled the air. Some people took notes, others simply tried to stay awake. It was day 4 of Monroe versus Ashland Correctional, a quietly building civil rights case. No national news yet, just local reporters, law students, and a handful of curious retirees with time on their hands. Then, the back door opened. Heads turned. Jasmine Crockett entered without a word, not as a lawyer today, not as a congresswoman, just an observer. Or at least that was the plan. She wore a sharp black blazer, her posture upright, eyes forward. No phone, no entourage, just her, a worn leather-bound notebook, and a small gold cross around her neck. It wasn't flashy, no diamonds, no sparkle. Just a simple, smooth curve of gold that hinted at age. It had belonged to her grandmother. She might have shared that if anyone asked, but no one did. Still, people noticed. Jasmine took a seat in the front row behind the plaintiff. She crossed her legs at the ankle and gave the plaintiff's attorney, Lauren Gates, a small glance. Not a smile, just a nod of acknowledgement. Lauren nodded back and returned to her notes. Minutes later, Judge Raymond Driscoll entered. 50s, deep lines across his brow, no nonsense. The kind of judge who didn't tolerate whispering or visible Starbucks cups. His reputation? Strict, methodical, unyielding on courtroom decorum. "Be seated," he said without looking up. As the room settled, his eyes drifted, then paused. Something had caught his attention on the edge of his vision. He squinted. "Madam," he said, clearing his throat. "You in the front row." Jasmine looked up. "Yes, Your Honor. May I ask you to remove that necklace?" The room stilled. Lauren's pen froze. The plaintiff, Cecil Monroe, a 67-year-old, Black Vietnam veteran, raised his eyebrows. Jasmine stayed calm. "Your Honor, the necklace," Driscoll said. "This is a court of law. We do not allow religious symbolism that may be construed as political or prejudicial." Her voice was steady. "It's a personal item, not a statement." "I understand," he replied, tapping his gavel softly. "But the rules are clear. You may observe from the gallery, but not in direct view of the jury while wearing religious symbols." A few people shifted uncomfortably. There were no cameras inside, but you could feel the hallway light up with texts. "You won't believe what just happened." Jasmine didn't flinch. "I'm here in a personal capacity, sir, but I respectfully decline to remove the necklace. It's not for show." The judge stared at her for a beat too long. "Very well," he said curtly. "You are fined $200 for violating courtroom dress protocol. Bailiff, make a note." That did it. The gallery stirred. Soft disbelief, hushed murmurs, a quiet wow from the back. Jasmine nodded once, opened her notebook, and wrote something down. Calm, composed. She didn't leave. She didn't argue. She just kept writing. Cecil leaned toward Lauren and whispered, "That's her. That's Crockett." Lauren whispered back, "Yeah, I didn't expect her here either." The hearing continued, technically, but the mood had changed. The case no longer felt like just Monroe v. Ashland Correctional. People kept glancing at the front row, at the woman who had been fined for a necklace she'd worn in every courtroom since passing the bar. No one knew it yet, but that necklace, or more precisely, the woman behind it, was about to change everything. But before that could happen, something no one had planned for brought the courtroom to a standstill. Judge Driscoll resumed as though nothing unusual had occurred. He flipped through briefs, called for opening arguments. But every few minutes his eyes flicked toward Jasmine, not with curiosity, with irritation, as though she had broken an unspoken rule that had nothing to do with courtroom decorum. "Lauren," Gates stood. Early 30s, composed, with a soft Arkansas drawl and sharp focus. She began to outline the case. Cecil Monroe, a 67-year-old Vietnam veteran, was suing Ashland Correctional Facility in Denton County, alleging excessive force by prison guards during a brief incarceration. Monroe had been held for 2 weeks due to a clerical error. He left with broken ribs, nerve damage in his left hand, and a limp he hadn't walked in with. Photos were presented, medical records cited, witness affidavits read aloud. As Lauren laid out the case, Jasmine watched in silence from the front row, her eyes fixed on every word. She only turned a page in her notebook when the opposing counsel, Daniel Sturgis, stood. He was slick, mid-40s, custom-tailored suit, and a voice trained to sound just casual enough to disarm. Sturgis opened by questioning the legitimacy of Monroe's injuries. He hinted at pre-existing conditions, dredged up an old bar fight from 1989, and tried to undermine the credibility of a fellow inmate who had submitted a sworn statement. Judge Driscoll allowed it all. Not a single one of Gates's objections stuck. Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant. Sustained, Driscoll snapped. Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Overruled. It went on like that for nearly an hour. Through it all, Jasmine's pen moved steadily. She wasn't doodling, she was diagramming, drawing arrows, jotting down case citations from memory, mapping legal strategies like branches of a tree. When Lauren finally sat down, her face was flushed but composed. She adjusted her blazer, holding her posture. As Sturgis returned to his table, he shot Jasmine a quick glance, smug, dismissive, like she was just another spectator in a room he controlled. Cecil leaned back, visibly tense, his jaw clenched, his eyes flicking from Jasmine to Lauren. Why they letting him talk like that? He whispered, barely audible. Lauren murmured back, It's Driscoll. He doesn't like emotion, just facts, cold, flat facts. That man just told the jury I was drunk in '89, Cecil hissed. Like that's the same thing. Lauren didn't respond. Her breathing stayed steady, but her jaw flexed tight. Driscoll called a 10-minute recess. The room stirred. Some people stepped outside. A few reporters rushed into the hallway to call their editors. Jasmine remained seated. The bailiff approached her. You planning on staying the whole time? I am. You gonna pay that fine? I am. But not today. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Just walked off. A moment later, Lauren dropped her case folder, papers scattered across the floor. Jasmine stood without hesitation and knelt to help. You okay? She asked softly. Lauren looked up, momentarily surprised by the concern. Yeah. Just a long morning. Jasmine handed her the last sheet. You're doing better than they want you to think. Lauren let out a breath. Thanks. You think Driscoll would have fined a man for wearing a yarmulke? Lauren paused. No, I don't. Jasmine gave a slight smile and sat back down. Across the room, Judge Driscoll had returned. He watched the brief exchange from the bench. He said nothing, but the stiffness in his posture betrayed him. The calm was thinning. No one expected what happened next. Not from argument or evidence, but from something purely physical. The courtroom doors opened as everyone returned from break. Quiet footsteps, murmured conversations fading as people took their seats. The judge hadn't reappeared yet. The bailiff stood by the bench, alert. Lauren leaned forward at the plaintiff's table, fingers gripping the edge, tapping her legal pad lightly. She glanced at her notes, then at Cecil, who gave her a faint nod. Jasmine sat still behind them, focused, but with a new tension in her frame. Her shoulders squared, her gaze sharpened. When Driscoll returned, he didn't waste time. We'll proceed with the testimony of the plaintiff. Mr. Monroe, you may take the stand. Cecil rose carefully, adjusting his blazer. The limp was obvious now. He made his way to the witness box and took the oath, voice steady. Lauren stood. Mr. Monroe, can you describe what happened on the morning of January 12th? He opened his mouth, then paused. I was woken up before the lights came on, he said. I heard yelling. Thought it wasn't for me, but then a CO opened my cell door. He mimed being yanked upward. No warning, just grabbed me by the shirt, slammed me against the wall. My head hit the side rail. Lauren nodded. Did you resist at any point? I was half asleep. I thought it was a drill at first. I didn't swing. I didn't say nothing. Not until they put the cuffs on too tight. As he spoke, Jasmine watched Lauren. The younger attorney was trying to stay composed, but her body told a different story. Shoulders tense, one hand pressed to her lower abdomen. Lauren's voice thinned. Mr. Monroe, what happened after they restrained you? They threw me on the floor, he said quietly. My face hit the cement. I think I blacked out. Lauren nodded, reached for the next page in her folder, and froze. She blinked twice, then swayed. Cecil stopped mid-sentence. Jasmine shot to her feet instinctively. Lauren's knees buckled. Her hand slapped the table, then slipped. She crumpled. To the floor! Call 911! Someone shouted. The bailiff rushed over. A woman from the gallery, possibly a nurse, stepped forward, kneeling beside Lauren to check her pulse. She was breathing, but shallowly. Sweat beaded along her temple. Jasmine moved in fast, helping to gently roll Lauren onto her side. She looked pale earlier, Jasmine said, but she didn't say anything about being sick. Paramedics arrived within minutes, wheeling Lauren out down the center aisle. Cecil stood frozen in the witness box, eyes locked on the space where his attorney had fallen. Judge Driscoll rubbed his temples. This court is in recess until further notice. Counsel for the plaintiff is indisposed. We'll reschedule. But Cecil wasn't having it. He stood, voice trembling. Your Honor, we don't have time for another delay. I ain't got money for a new lawyer. If she can't do it. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing on Jasmine. You can, right? You a lawyer, ain't you? Heads turned. Jasmine didn't answer right away. I'm here in a personal capacity, she said. I'm not part of this case. But you could be, Cecil pressed, desperation rising. You've been taking notes this whole time. You know what's going on. You heard all of it. Please. The courtroom fell still. Even the gallery held its breath. Judge Driscoll leaned forward. Are you licensed in Texas, Miss Crocker? I am. And are you willing to take over representation on record? Jasmine looked from Cecil to the judge. I'd need a few minutes to review the file. You'll have 10, Driscoll said, dry as dust. I'll allow it. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Murmurs erupted. Reporters scribbled notes. Jasmine walked calmly to the plaintiff's table and opened Lauren's folder. She didn't ask for help, didn't pause. She read. Across the aisle, Sturgis leaned back in his chair, watching her. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. His fingers tapped the face of his watch, dismissive. He didn't take her seriously, not yet. To him, this was a hiccup, a delay, nothing more. But Jasmine flipped through the file like she had trained for this very moment. No panic, just precision. She circled pages, flagged a sticky note, jotted down timestamps. Cecil sat beside her, wringing the edge of his sleeve. I didn't mean to put you in no trouble, he whispered. You didn't, she said, eyes still on the papers. This case matters. A lot. You really think we got a chance? She stopped writing. Looked up. I don't take cases I don't believe in. You told the truth. It's on me now to make sure it doesn't get buried. The bailiff stepped forward. Court is now back in session. Judge Driscoll adjusted his glasses, eyeing Jasmine over the rim. Ms. Crocker, you are now counsel of record for the plaintiff. Yes, Your Honor. Understood. You may proceed. Jasmine stood slowly and stepped to the center of the courtroom. The gallery leaned in. Even the jurors sat up straighter. She didn't lead with drama, just truth. My client, Mr. Monroe, is not asking for sympathy. He's asking for the law to be applied, fairly. He's asking this court to recognize what happened not as a mistake, but a violation. She turned to the jury. He was detained by error. That's the first failure. But what happened after? That wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. It was excessive. And it was avoidable. Objection. Argumentative. Sturgis barked. Driscoll raised an eyebrow. She's in opening remarks. Overruled. The smirk vanished from Sturgis's face. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. She moved to the screen, clicked a button, and projected a black and white image. Cecil's intake form. Bold red ink marked the critical note. Hold lifted, release approved. Date, January 11th. That, she said, pointing, was the day before. He was assaulted. Next slide, medical records, fractured ribs, facial bruising, radial nerve damage in the left forearm. This wasn't just unnecessary force, Jasmine said. It happened while he was supposed to be on his way home. Sturgis sighed loudly. Jasmine let him. She moved seamlessly into the evidence. Statements from the correctional officers, inconsistencies in their reports, time-stamped surveillance footage showing guards entering Monroe's cell, and she wasn't slowing down. An hour before their shift began, minor details Lauren had marked in red ink. Jasmine was connecting them now like she was unraveling a complex knot. The courtroom held its breath. Even Judge Driscoll leaned forward. Then Jasmine returned to the plaintiff's table and pulled out a small laminated card, an excerpt from Ashland Correctional's training manual. Inmate handling. Use of force protocol. She held it up. This section, she said, states that force must only be used as a last resort, and only when there is a clear and present threat. She paced slowly past the jury box. My client is 67 years old. He has degenerative joint disease. He walks with a limp. There was no fight, no threat. There was confusion, then pain, then silence. One juror visibly flinched. Another blinked hard and glanced at the judge. Across the aisle, Sturgis scribbled furiously. Jasmine placed a steady hand on the plaintiff's table and locked eyes with Driscoll. We're not here to make headlines, she said. We're here to get answers, and to make sure the system that made this mistake doesn't get to pretend it never happened. She sat. The courtroom remained still, suspended in the weight of her words. Finally, Judge Driscoll cleared his throat. Defense may proceed. Sturgis stood trying to reclaim the room, but he didn't realize he'd already lost the one thing he needed most, the jury. He straightened his tie and walked toward them with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. His voice, now soft and composed, carried practiced empathy. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this case isn't about injustice. It's about perception, about memory, about a man treated fairly under difficult circumstances, who may have misunderstood the intentions of those around him. Jasmine said nothing. Her eyes stayed on her notes. Sturgis clicked his remote. A photo appeared. Cecil Monroe exiting a prison hallway, walking without assistance, flanked by 2 guards. No wheelchair, no visible trauma. That's what we see. That's what we know, he said, turning back to the jury. There's no video of the alleged assault, just medical records and pain. He let that hang. And pain, while very real, is subjective. Cecil's face tightened. Beneath the table, Jasmine rested a calming hand on his forearm. Sturgis shifted gears. You'll also hear from a witness, a fellow inmate, who claims he saw the incident. But ask yourselves, how credible is a man currently serving time for perjury? He let the question drift like smoke. Then he returned to his seat, Glancing at the jury, smug once again, Jasmine stood. "Permission to cross?" "Granted," Driscoll replied. She walked to the screen and tapped it once. The hallway photo vanished, replaced by the intake release. Document. "You said Mr. Monroe walked out without injuries," she said. Sturgis nodded. "Correct." She zoomed in on the nurse's notes. "This form says he was discharged after a checkup, but that checkup occurred more than 14 hours after the alleged incident, correct?" Sturgis hesitated. "Yes, per the timeline. So you agree there was a window, nearly a full day, where no medical assessment was made?" "Objection. Misleading." "Overruled," Driscoll said. "Answer the question." "Yes," Sturgis muttered. Jasmine turned to the jury. "We're not talking about a skinned knee. We're talking about fractured bones. That's not subjective. That's not imagined." She turned back toward the witness box. "You mentioned the witness's criminal record. Let's talk about that." She held up a court document. "Jerome King, yes, he was convicted 5 years ago for signing a false affidavit in a property dispute. What Mr. Sturgis didn't mention," she stepped forward, "is that Mr. King came forward voluntarily. No one contacted him. No deals were offered. He requested to testify, fully aware his credibility would be attacked." She paused. Why would someone do that, knowing it might hurt them? A juror tilted her head, thinking. Jasmine clicked the remote again. A floor plan of the holding unit appeared. She traced a path on the screen. King's bunk faced Mr. Monroe's cell. His line of sight was unobstructed. His statement includes details that match internal security logs, guard rotations, entry times, number of officers, data he had no access to when he wrote it. Now the jury leaned in. Jasmine returned to the table and lifted one final document. And lastly, this. She held it up. The facility's own internal report. Her voice slowed. This was never shared with the Monroe family. But it confirms an incident was logged, names redacted. But the timestamp? It matches the morning of January 12th. She let that land. Then she placed the document on the table and sat. Jasmine handed copies to the clerk. Judge Driscoll raised an eyebrow. Sturgis leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You can redact a name, Jasmine said, addressing the court. But you can't redact a pattern. There's more here than what we were first shown. Cecil leaned closer and whispered, You're tearing him up. Jasmine didn't smile. It's not about him, she said quietly. It's about you. But she wasn't done. Her next argument would cut even deeper, closer to the heart of the case, and shift the energy in the room for good. By the time the afternoon session resumed, the courtroom felt heavier. The jury wasn't just listening now, they were watching. Their faces sharper, their posture tighter. Judge Driscoll sat straighter, elbows planted on the bench as though anchoring himself. Jasmine stood slowly. Her hand rested briefly on the leather folder before her. This time she didn't approach the screen or the witness stand. She remained where she was. Before we continue, she said, her voice low but firm, I need to address something that happened this morning. Not as an argument, just context. For all of us. The room stilled. She reached for the small gold cross around her neck. It caught the light, faint but deliberate. This belonged to my grandmother, she said. Her name was Elsie Redmond, born 1930. Grew up in Ruston, Louisiana. She couldn't vote until she was nearly 40. She believed in both faith and the law. Jasmine paused. She didn't think they were enemies, just misunderstood, especially by people who want power, without accountability. A quiet beat. I was fined $200 this morning, she continued, for wearing this necklace in court, because someone believed it might interfere with objectivity, that it might send the wrong message. Her eyes scanned the room. But if you're threatened by a necklace, maybe it's not the symbol that's the problem. There was a subtle shift in the gallery, people shifting in their seats. I didn't come here to make a statement, she said, but I won't ignore one that's already been made. And then she pivoted, back to the case. This trial is about overreach, about systems that act with more power than they've been granted, about how authority, left unchecked, can twist truth until it snaps and breaks the people beneath it. "Objection," Sturgis cut in. "Your Honor, she's delivering a sermon." Judge Driscoll didn't even look at him. Overruled. "Sit down, Mr. Sturgis." It was the first time his voice held visible irritation. Jasmine gave a single nod and walked to the screen. She tapped it once. A Supreme Court case appeared, Hope versus Pelzer, 2002. In this case, she said, a prison guard cuffed an inmate to a hitching post in the sun. The court ruled it a violation of the Eighth Amendment. She looked at the jury. It didn't matter that it wasn't protocol. What mattered was that it was cruel. That's the bar, not the rule book. The impact. She flipped to the next case, Hudson vs. McMillian, 1992. In this case, a prisoner was beaten by guards. His injuries weren't considered serious, but the court still found it unconstitutional. She let that sink in, because brutality doesn't require broken bones, just intent. Now Judge Driscoll leaned back, hands folded. Jasmine looked at the jury again. "My client's pain isn't in question. His truth isn't theoretical. And what happened to him?" A pause. "Wasn't. Just unfortunate it was unconstitutional." She switched the screen off and returned to her seat. For a moment, no one moved. The silence wasn't empty, it was weight. Then Driscoll cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene after a brief recess. Jury will remain seated." As the bailiff opened the door, Jasmine quietly gathered her notes. Sturgis passed by her, slower this time. "You're not bad," he muttered. She didn't look up. "That's why I'm here." He scoffed and kept walking. Cecil leaned in, voice low. "Your grandmother. She'd be proud." Jasmine didn't answer, but her hand lifted briefly to the cross, just for a second. As the jury prepared to deliberate, even Judge Driscoll seemed to grasp that this trial wasn't just about one man's injuries. It was about the kind of courtroom he was presiding over. The room wasn't quiet. It was still, like the air had thickened. The jurors sat, eyes ahead, waiting for final instructions. Jasmine sat with her hands folded neatly over her notes, shoulders square, gaze focused on something far beyond the verdict. Cecil sat beside her, breathing shallowly. He hadn't said much since closing arguments, just one sentence. "Whatever happens, thank you." Now the court clerk stood. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" A woman in the third row stood. "We have, Your Honor." The envelope was handed over. Judge Driscoll read it in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he passed it back. "In the matter of Monroe versus Ashland Correctional," he began, "on the count of use of excessive force in violation of the Eighth Amendment, we find in favor of the plaintiff. A beat! We award damages in the amount of $285,000. The reaction was small but unmistakable. Sharp intakes of breath, a few murmured wows, a ripple of disbelief moving through the gallery. "They actually did it!" someone whispered. Cecil sat perfectly still. His eyes didn't well up, not exactly, but something shifted. Like the weight he'd been carrying for years had begun to lift, one layer at a time. Jasmine didn't react at first. She simply placed a hand on Cecil's arm and gave it a steady, grounding squeeze. Then she stood, turned to the jury, and gave a respectful nod. Judge Driscoll tapped his gavel. "Court is adjourned." People rose, murmuring, shuffling toward the exits, but the judge wasn't finished. "Miss Crockett," he said, "a word, please." Jasmine paused. The courtroom doors opened and bodies flowed out, but she didn't follow. Instead, she turned and walked calmly back toward the bench. In the corridor outside, a cameraman raced by trying to catch her exit. Reporters were already texting headlines. But inside it was quiet again. Judge Driscoll had stepped down and now stood beside the clerk's table, waiting. "I reviewed the fine I issued this morning," he said, his voice low enough for her. Ears alone. She didn't respond, just listened. "I was wrong," he admitted. "It wasn't about the cross. It was about control. I didn't expect to be challenged, especially not by someone who wasn't even supposed to be here." Jasmine tilted her head slightly as if to say, "And yet, here we are?" He sighed. "I've struck the fine from the record. Signed the dismissal myself." "Thank you," she said simply. Then, with something between apology and admiration, he added, "You were the sharpest lawyer in the room today, even when you weren't supposed to be in it." She allowed a small smile. "I didn't come here to prove anything. No," he said. "That's what made it work." As she turned to leave, he stopped her with one final question. "How long have you had that necklace?" "Since I passed the bar," she replied. "But I've worn it longer." He nodded once. "Don't stop." She exited the courtroom without a glance back. Outside, cameras flashed and microphones surged forward, but the story they were chasing wasn't the one that would echo online by nightfall. The sun was bright and white above the courthouse steps. Reporters clustered near the entrance, forming a semicircle of anticipation. They weren't expecting Jasmine to walk out alone, but she did. No entourage, no aides, just a woman in a black blazer, a notebook under one arm, and a gold cross glinting against her collarbone, visible and untouchable. Microphones extended instantly. "Congresswoman Crockett, did you expect to win today? Will you be taking on more legal cases? Was the judge's fine about the necklace or about who you are?" She raised a hand, calm, firm. "I came here in a personal capacity," she said, "and ended up stepping into something that mattered. Not because I planned to, but because someone needed help. The court ruled in his favor. That's what justice looks like." Did Judge Driscoll apologize for the fine? There it was, the real question. Jasmine paused, then answered, "Let's just say we had a respectful conversation. A fine was issued, and later withdrawn. She could have stopped there, but she didn't. I think people sometimes confuse authority with correctness," she said. "Being in charge doesn't mean you're always right. But being willing to change your mind, that's leadership." That line would hit headlines within the hour. She descended the steps. Cameras trailed after her. A reporter tried to keep pace, recorder in hand. But Jasmine didn't rush, didn't shrink. She walked steadily until she reached the sidewalk, turned right, and kept going. Behind her, in a quiet side entrance, Judge Driscoll stepped out. No robe, no audience. Just him and a legal assistant. A reporter spotted him. "Judge Driscoll, any comment on today's ruling?" He hesitated, then looked into the lens. "I was reminded today that brilliance doesn't always come with a title or a robe. Sometimes it just walks in, sits down, and waits for the moment to speak. Are you referring to Miss Crockett?" "I am." "And the fine?" Driscoll exhaled through his nose. "A small, private reckoning." Then he nodded, just once, and said nothing more. "It was never about the jewelry," Driscoll said. "That necklace didn't challenge the court. My assumption did." He turned and walked away, leaving the reporter speechless. Back down the street, Jasmine was already gone. She'd slipped unnoticed into a quiet bookstore off Commerce and Griffin. No cameras. No crowd. Inside, she bought one thing, a used copy of Gideon's Trumpet. At the register, the cashier squinted. "You that lady from the courthouse?" Jasmine smiled. "Just someone who loves the Constitution." In newsrooms across the country, editors scrambled for headlines. Most went with flash Congresswoman saves civil rights case after courtroom twist gold cross, silver tongue, the day Crockett took the courtroom, but one outlet came closer to the truth. Crockett doesn't wear power, she wields it. Still, the media couldn't script what mattered most. What this moment meant for the people who'd long stopped believing that someone might actually listen and fight when it counted. It started with a 57-second clip, grainy, leaked from someone seated near the back. Not official. Not polished. It opened with Jasmine standing beside the evidence screen, her fingers brushing the cross at her collarbone, her voice calm and steady. If you're afraid of a necklace, maybe it's not the symbol that's threatening. Nightfall. That line had gone viral, subtitled, clipped, reposted everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, cable news ran it on loop under banners like, "Cross controversy goes viral, who is Jasmine Crockett?" But what mattered wasn't the attention. It was the reaction. In Phoenix, a civics teacher played the clip in her 11th grade classroom. Half-asleep students sat up halfway through. One, who hadn't raised his hand all year, asked, "Wait, can judges really do that?" In Kansas, a Vietnam vet, like Cecil, shared it with the caption, "We fought for this." She reminded them why. In Milwaukee, a pastor played the clip during Bible study and said, "That's what it looks like to walk into fire with grace." It wasn't just the necklace or the win. It was the way Jasmine held the room, uninvited, unwelcome, unshaken. In the days that followed, debate flared. Should courts ban religious symbols? Was the judge biased? Was Jasmine treated unfairly? But the loudest voices weren't pundits. They were ordinary people. People who had been dismissed, underestimated, fined for speaking, ignored for looking wrong. They saw themselves in her poise, in her refusal to shout when others would have screamed, in her mastery of a system that too often chews people up without leaving a bruise. Cecil. Monroe gave one interview. He sat on his daughter's porch holding the verdict papers. "She didn't even know me," he said. "But she knew the system, and she didn't let it walk all over me, just 'cause it could." Lauren Gates recovered fast. She issued a public thank you and privately offered to co-counsel with Jasmine on another civil rights case. As for Jasmine, she returned to Congress the following week. Back to hearings, votes, and briefings. No speech, no tweet. Just the same woman, moving with quiet intent. Except now, the necklace never came off. Every session, every meeting, it stayed. One journalist caught her in the Capitol hallway. "Has the cross become a symbol of defiance?" he asked. She paused, then shook her head. "It's not defiance," she said. "It's memory. My grandmother wore it when they told her she couldn't learn. My mother wore it when they told her she couldn't vote. I wear it because they told me I didn't belong in certain rooms." She smiled. "And then I walked in anyway." That quote landed on 3 front pages, not just in political circles, but in homes where people had been fined for wearing the wrong thing, where voices had been silenced for speaking too soon, where young lawyers had been told, "You don't look the part." People who once believed faith and law had no place side by side now saw how both could serve justice when carried with integrity. This moment reminded them, justice isn't about who yells the loudest. It's about who speaks when it counts most, because sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the front row, waiting for its name to be called.